Greetings everybody, this is Leviathan here, and today I've got a build guide for you on the Whirlwind Rend Barbarian. I've had a lot of people asking me about it from my stream recently. It's twitch.tv/Leviathan111, you can see right above me. And there's a bit to cover, so, try not to make this video too long, but there will be tons of useful links and timestamps in the video description below, so definitely feel free to reference those. There's a build guide on Diablo fans, a little written version, and then also on D3 Planner there will be some stats and variations, things that we cover in this video that you'll be able to look at and reference. So I want to give this to you in as many ways as possible to hopefully make things simple and easy to follow. As you can see, I've got some gameplay on screen for you. I'm doing a GR 101 during Season 20. It's just a few days into the season now, so my gear is still at a very incomplete level in terms of being quality. I have no augments yet, Paragon 1000, and this is all very achievable for somebody who wants to hop in and do a little bit with the season, play the Barbarian. It's a really fun, fast build. Great for speed farming. This is how I'm going to farm the majority of my Paragon this season. The gameplay is so smooth and like Netflixy. You can do anything. You can watch a stream, my stream, while you do this. You can, have a conversation with your friends on Discord. Like, it's just very checked out. But if you do play, in a focused fashion, you will actually be able to just cruise through these and really reap the rewards and benefits of flying through GRs, which is a lot of legendaries per hour, a lot of Paragon experience per hour, and I'm really enjoying it so far. This build was popular last season because that was when Barb got a lot of additional help for Rend in particular, which is doing all your damage here. Don't be fooled by the Whirlwind. The Whirlwind is simply delivering the Rends to the enemies. And we'll talk about some Rend mechanics as well, like manual rending and stuff like that versus letting Whirlwind apply it. And this really fun playstyle came about because the Barbs were really in need of some help in terms of their options. They were a bit behind, and now they're one of the strongest and actually pretty well balanced class in terms of builds that you can do. This is also the pushing build, Whirlwind Rend, for the highest GRs that the Bard can get. Potentially rivaled by the new Frenzy set, but it's looking like most Barbs believe that Whirlwind Rend will be the top of the leaderboard once again this season. So, it's just something to get comfortable with as well for the speeds. It's a little different in pushing, and one thing I want to definitely push on you is that there are a ton of options for speed farming in the items that you choose, the skills that you use, the gems that you use, and I think it'll factor mainly into like how good your gear is, what level of GRs you're trying to speed, what times you like to see in your speeds, and a bunch of factors like that. So don't be afraid to experiment. This is just one version of the build. I'm still testing things out as I get ideas and have people pop in the stream and say, have you tried this, do this combination, things like that. So feel free to check back in on the channel here, subscribe to the channel. There'll probably be updates. Again, check those links in the video description. We'll have some updates there as well. But this is the Rift, basically. Most of mine I'm doing these days on the 101s have been in the 3-minute to 3.5-minute range. If they're really good, like good maps and good pylon distribution, they can be, sub 3 minutes as well. So you can see that's pretty much the gist of it right there. And so let's get into some of the stuff that I did want to show you guys. You can close that out. This is a link of the Diablo fans build guide. Here I'll discuss the skills, the items, and why I choose what I chose. We'll start with the skills. Rend Bloodbath is the main damage dealer, like I said, and it's being delivered through the Wrath of the Waste set with your Whirlwind and Rend together. So Whirlwind is a skill that you use, but you don't want to prioritize its damage at all. You don't really want to build any percent Whirlwind or anything like that. It's all about your Rend damage. And we use the Bloodbath rune because when you kill enemies, the bleeds will basically pop off of them and go on to other enemies. So that's when, if you look back at the gameplay, you'll see these huge just pops of density. When you get those really nice density pulls, it's just beautiful to watch. It's really satisfying. The enemies will just all explode together. And that's why you kind of want density around your elites. The elites will be the fights that take the longest, and obviously the Rift Guardian itself, which is why we use the Bane of the Stricken gem. But if you have density around elites, then all those bleeds and bloodbath will pop off the trash when they die, and then hit the elite and do damage there as well. So it all works out really nicely to just have crazy amounts of damage instantaneously happening because of some of the powers in the build as well. Whirlwind Wind Shear we're going with specifically to generate Fury here. There is a version of the build where you can use the Bull Kathos set, and in that case you get all the Fury you need because the power of the sword's mighty weapons generates Fury for you. In that case you have some choices of rune. You could go with Hurricane to have a bit more of a pull scenario going on, but you could also go with Blood Funnel too if you want a bit more recovery. If you feel like your life is kind of yo-yoing or not feeling like it's very sustainable, you can go with Blood Funnel. I like Hurricane for speed farming if I'm going with the Bull Kathos weapons, but when you go with the Echoing Fury Ambo's Pride setup, which is the one that I'm showcasing, I would definitely go with Wind Shear so that you can generate all the Fury you need. Another way to generate some Fury as well is Furious Charging through things with Merciless Assault. This is a focus and restraint build. We use those two rings, so you need a generator and you need a spender. Whirlwind is our spender, Furious Charge is our generator. You can also use Ground Stomp in the pushing setup. You're going to be using Ground Stomp because you need to create density, and that's when you're going to be doing your manual rends and have more area damage in the build. In this version, we just want to really mow through the rifts. We're not worried about manual rending so much, so we're going to A, not use much area damage because we have other stats that we'd like instead, and B, not take Ground Stomp because it's a little slow. I like Furious Charge because it allows you to continue your movement through the rift very quickly. And those instances where it's a little dead because Whirlwind is a slower moving skill, you can just Furious Charge right through. So I like that a lot. Battle Rage into the fray. A mechanic behind Rend is that Rend does not crit. However, crit stats are taken into account for Rend's damage. So keep that in mind, that if you're doing anything that does damage based off of crits within your build, so the most common rune for Battle Rage into the fray is the Bloodshed rune, but that is essentially useless for you, not very effective during Rend builds because Rend doesn't crit, so the damage you'd get from the Bloodshed pops off of Battle Rage would be very minimal. But you can actually still benefit your Rends by having crit stats. So with Battle Rage into the fray, if you're surrounded by a ton of enemies, which you normally should be, then you're going to get a ton of crit chance, and those Rends will do just even more damage because again, that crit does get factored into Rend, even though Rend itself does not do crit damage. Sprint Marathon, I like this because the build does move a bit slower, especially in the version with Echoing Fury and Ambo's Pride. In the Bull Kathos version, there's movement speed built into the set, so you get a little faster moving GRs, but speed is the name of the game here. We're trying to speed GRs, so I like Marathon. I usually will combo it with my Furious Charge, so I'll just hit Furious Charge and Sprint almost simultaneously, and that way I'm generating Fury and then spending it with the Sprint and having a better movement speed throughout the rift. You can also swap this if you're feeling like you need a bit more tanky stats. You can go to Warcry. Veteran's Warning gives you more dodge chance, which will combo nicely with your with your Wrath of the Berserker. You can also go for Impunity, which is the rune that gives you more just resolute toughness, more static toughness with all resistance. So you can always swap that, but I like Sprint when you don't need that extra toughness, and it allows you to be a bit faster. Last but not least, Wrath of the Berserker. Here you can see I don't have a rune because I am using Mordek's Brace. However, one of the things I discussed later is that you do have item choices. If you don't want to use Mordek's Brace, ideally you'd want to use Nemesis Bracers, and that means you would have to pick a rune of Wrath of the Berserker, and you can either go for the damage rune, which is Insanity, or you can go for the damage reduction rune, which is Striding Giant. It really depends on, if you're taking damage and you're trying to stay alive. Dying is the slowest thing you can do in a speed grid rift, so don't die if you can avoid it, especially on hardcore. I really suggest thinking about which direction you want to go. If you're trying to do higher GRs, then maybe you want to account for more defense. If you're going just pure speed, lower, faster GRs, then definitely Insanity is the way to go. But here, Mordek's Brace, we get all the runes, and Wrath of the Berserker is just an insane skill. And we also have 100% uptime on it because we use an Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac, and we have a passive, that we'll go into those now, Boon of Bull Kathos, which reduces some of the cooldown of your Wrath of the Berserker. We also have cooldown on gear, we have a diamond in our helm, so those all things come together to take care of keeping our Wrath of the Berserker up at all times. And one thing to keep in mind too is you want a decent amount of cooldown reduction. Even with Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac, throughout the Rift you'll have plenty of uptime on Wrath of the Berserker, but against the Rift Guardian, because the Echoing Fury Ambo's Pride setup can potentially have a little bit of slower attack speed, you could have gaps in your Wrath of the Berserker, and that can get really scary if that's where your defense is coming from with Striding Giant, because then suddenly you're very vulnerable and the Rift Guardian can destroy you. So I would say to be cautious, be overabundant in your CDR, and then once you find a comfortable point, you can start to take some of those rolls off and, you know, change things up in your build a little bit. But there's plenty of space to get CDR, so you should have more than enough. I like Ruthless as another rune, or sorry, another passive here for damage. Some people will go with some other ones like Berserker Rage, or even there is one, looks like my thing's not loading here, but there is another rune as well, Brawler, where if you're surrounded by enemies, you'll get increased damage as well. So you have some choices again, like I always mention. Ruthless, Brawler, Berserker Rage, if you're at topped off Fury all the time, which you will be for a majority of the GR as well. So you can try any of those out. Rampage is great just because you will be killing tons of trash as you just spin through the Rift. So you'll have permanent uptime on this with all 25 stacks, just extra strength. And once you get a lot of Paragon and augments on your gear, you should have a ton of strength to modify this. And then Nerves of Steel. As a hardcore player, I love always having my Cheat Death equipped. It's just necessary. Again, like I was mentioning, for some of those times where maybe you have a little bit of Wrath of the Berserker downtime unexpectedly, having a Cheat Death is nice in case you do get hit and, you know, procced but not die. Again, you want all your gem ups, you want no downtime, you don't want to die. You could switch this in softcore if you feel like you don't really care about having a Cheat Death, and pick up, like I was mentioning, any of those other damage passives and just, you know, be even more powerful than usual. So that's it for your skills and your choices with them as well. Feel free to experiment. Furious Charge I also like because we have Band of the Might, and you want to proc that to get that big damage reduction. Furious Charge I feel like just gives me a lot of options, and I like options in terms of movement on the battlefield. But some people really like Groundstone. As far as the gear goes, you can see we wear the full Wrath of the Waste set. I'll actually swap over to the D3 planner at this point because it shows a bit more details. And we want to look at some of the statting priorities and such on the gear. Again, this will all be linked in the video description, so feel free to reference that on your own. I just put this together. We have the two different setups. You can see here, this is the Echoing Fury Ambo's Pride setup. These are all the ideal stats, and they're all primals. This is not my gear, right? A lot of people are like, how do you get all those primals? This is D3 planner where you can generate any setup that you want and see what it'll theoretically look like. So this is the gear on, oh, I didn't even make this one primal, but in any case, I'm gonna do that right now. We want strength, critical hit damage, critical hit chance, cooldown reduction on the gloves. It's pretty standard. You could maybe get attack speed if you get a quad glove, and that would be a little nice extra. On the pauldrons of the waist, the shoulders, we got strength, all res, cooldown, rend. Again, we want to build up our rend damage. This is one spot where you can get it. You can also get some area damage here. If you want to go into higher GRs and you want to manually rend, then area damage is great. Do note, another rend mechanic is that rend that's applied by your whirlwinds does not affect area damage. It doesn't do any area damage. So the only way that you can spread with your area damage and take advantage of that statistic is to manually rend. And those will be your strongest rends, especially when you're pushing and things like that. You could potentially cover that in a push version of the build if you do a guide for that later. But just keep that in mind if you do decide to add area damage into the build and you're like, it's not really doing anything. Well, you have to manually rend to get that to really work for you. I was mentioning places to get rend damage. Another one is on your chest. So typically you're going strength, vit, rend, and then you have your sockets. I'm using diamonds for the extra defense. If you feel like you're fine, you can throw rubies in there for more strength. We do have a diamond in the helm, which is important just for more CDR. Typical stats there, strength, vit, critical hit chance, and then a socket. You can see on my secondaries, I like pickup radius just because the orbs, it's nice to pick up the orbs and not have to like worry about them. Right now on my character, I have 3 pickup radius, and it's so painful to try and get all the orbs. So ideally, I'd like more pickup radius on my actual barb. But you're not going out of your way to get it. You just hope that it's on some of your pieces. Flavor of Time. This is an optional item, but it's not even really optional. It is by far the best in slot for the amulet. It's really hard to get a good one. Good luck getting anything that looks like this. Physical damage, critical hit chance, cooldown, which it always comes with, and then a socket. Man, this would be the dream. We're going physical elemental because that is what our rune is with Rend. So we got Rend, Bloodbath. Doesn't matter, you know, we have Wind Shear, for instance, which is lightning. It doesn't matter what rune your Whirlwind is, it matters what rune element your Rend is. So you want to make sure you're matching your element on gear with your Rend. So Bloodbath, physical, that's why we got physical damage for our affix on gear. Good luck getting this Flavor of Time. It would be so sick. So you get the double pylons. It's great if you get a power early, a speed early, then you're zooming through, you're doing crazy damage. It makes your speed GRs really nice. Another option would maybe be a Hellfire Amulet, even though those aren't that fun to farm. But, you know, we mentioned so many good passives for the Bard. It's something that you can use early on before you get a great Flavor of Time. But I would even use a crappy Flavor of Time just because it's that good for farming. So make sure you get one and throw it on there. Again, Mordek's Brace, like I was saying, you do have options here, Mordek's Brace or Nemesis Bracers. They should look the same though. You can go physical, strength, critical hit chance, and then I like life per hit just to have one roll of it so that you get a little sustain from that. If you don't need it, you can just go with the traditional vitality roll. But this is a nice place to just pick up some extra life per hit. And you can always rearrange your Paragon to get more vitality so you can have a life total that you're happy with. The belt is mandatory, Lamentation. This gives you a multiplier to your Rend damage and also lets you stack 2 Rends on an enemy. So it's just tons of help for Rend. This is what's starting to move the Rend damage into the stratosphere. It's a very traditional item as far as stats go. So you got Strength Vit, resistance to all elements, and then life percent. It's good stuff there. And then you can roll a secondary on that. You could go chance to freeze, something. Who knows? Whatever. Doesn't matter. On the pants, Strength Vit, All Res, Sockets, very standard pants. The secondaries are like Life After Kill and Pickup Radius. Nothing much to report there. Boots are pretty standard as well. Strength Vit, All Res. The fourth thing is whatever. You could go Armor just for a little more defense there, but you get so much Armor as a Strength class. It's not that important. You could go with the Life Regen. You could even go with the Movement Speed and give yourself a little more Paragon to play with in that primary part of Paragon. But it really doesn't matter. Just those top 3, Strength, Vit, All Res. And then for the rings, this is mandatory and something you can do in Season 20 in specific. Well, technically you can do it outside of the season as well, but it's way squishier, so it's a little scarier. But we have Focus and Restraint. And we have that. It's really nice multiplier to your damage. The rings for these are like critical hit damage, critical hit chance, cooldown. Could be tough to get. You can always go Strength, crit stats or whatever you get, average damage even thrown in there, especially if you don't need more cooldown. If you feel like you can go without a few rolls of cooldown, average damage is another great thing to get here just to boost up your overall damage. But Focus and Restraint, great. You proc it, like I said, with Furious Charge and Whirlwind, and just it boosts your Rend damage again through the stratosphere. And then I'll talk about the weapons real quick. Ambo's Pride, super important for Rend. This is what applies your Rend with Whirlwind. Total damage of Rend is dealt over 1 second. So it takes what is a dot skill and essentially makes it an instant damage skill. You know, that 1 second tick, boom, all the damage of Rend that would have been done over time is then just instantly applied, it's essentially. For the Ambo's Pride, I usually use it as the offhand because we'll talk about, you know, maces and the fact that they have a higher base damage. And the offhand for the stats like Strength Vit, cooldown reduction. You could maybe go attack speed if you don't need the Vit or something like that, but you probably want some life rolls, so this is a good place to get one. And then on the main hand, we do have Echoing Fury. Here, it always comes with attack speed and percent damage and then strength, so you kind of don't have a lot of wiggle room. I've been rolling off the attack speed. I don't know if I'll always do that, but the idea behind why I'm doing it is because if I ever do get to the point where I'm going to be manually rending, then I want a really powerful main hand weapon. So maces have great base damage, and then I'm having the percent damage stick because your manual rends go off of your main hand weapon. Keep that in mind at any point when you're pushing. If you're ever going to be hitting manual rends, you want your biggest base damage weapon to be in your main hand because that's what will be checked to do the manual rend damage. And then for Echoing Fury, the new power they put on it is that slaying enemies engulfs the wielder into a frenzy. It gives you more attack speed and more movement speed, which is really nice. It's great for speed farming. It's exactly what you want. Help you move through the rift faster and attack faster. So that's that setup with these items. Like I mentioned, the other setup would be with the Bull Kathos weapons. The set bonus here gives you increased fury generation. So like I said, you don't need wind share at that point. You can go with blood funnel or hurricane, which is really nice for pulling in more enemies, creating some density. And you also get movement speed while you whirlwind and attack speed. So it's really nice for speed farming, but it does do a little less damage, especially because of the way that you have to use the cube. Since you can't equip Ambo's Pride, now it has to be in your cube. So it gives you less flexibility in that sense. And then you're also going to be doing potentially less damage. So I like it more in the realm of like speedier GRs, maybe lower GRs. And then if you're going to be going into some higher ones and maybe slower ones, then you can go with this EF Ambo's setup. Again, we have emerald diamonds in our weapons. Ramalanis to get the sockets in there, and that's just more crit damage, which again factors into your rend damage. For the legendary gems, Taeguk is a no-brainer. It's great for channeling builds. We are channeling while we're whirlwinding, so you know that just works very nicely for you. Increased damage, really sweet, and you get some increased armor for the defense. Stricken, this is purely there to help you kill the boss, since one of the things that Rend is slow at is killing bosses. This just makes it more consistent against the boss. So you could potentially swap this for a Bane of the Powerful if you want to. That's fine. I've been experimenting going back and forth with both. You clear the rift faster with Bane of the Powerful, but the boss certainly takes longer. And since that can be the most dangerous part of the rift, you might just want to go with Stricken and kill the boss as quickly as possible. And then a staple of most DPS builds is Bane of the Trapped. This is just a no-brainer, multiplier to your damage. Good to go. We'll quickly talk about the cube. In Season 20, we have an unlocked cube, so you can put any power anywhere. You can have 3 weapons, 3 jewelry. It's insanity. It's crazy. So we can take advantage of the fact that we do that by having our focus and restraint set up. And then we have the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac, which, like I mentioned, will help us have 100% uptime on Wrath of the Berserker. Band of Might in the armor slot, which, whoa, what's a ring in the armor slot? This is going to give us our damage reduction, really big damage reduction, 80%, huge. And then here I have the Furnace. This is also a slot that's variable, especially in Season 20, because you could go with another ring and take Convention of Elements. I think when you're going into higher GRs, it might be more worthwhile, but in the GRs that I've been doing in the season so far, I've found Furnace to be a bit more consistent because I have uptime on it all the time against the elites, which, you know, take the longest, including the Rift Guardian. And in longer rifts, I might get more uptime, or at least usefulness, out of the physical rotation on Convention. So it'll be something I play with as the season goes on. But, you know, this is where I'm kind of landing at right now. Had to decide on something. And then, like I mentioned, if you go with the BK setup, the thing that changes will be that the weapon has to be Ambo's Pride so that you get your instant rends and Whirlwind applying rend. And that is basically it, guys, for this. I know it's a longer video, but I wanted to make sure I covered everything, and I'm sure I didn't even cover everything. So please feel free to hop into the comments. Let me know what you liked about the build. If there's things you would change, how your experiences have been. I'm having a blast with this so far this season. Again, come check out the stream. I'm trying to stream every single day during the season to showcase my gameplay. Be spending a lot of time on Barb, so come ask your questions. Come see if there are any updates or changes to the build. Twitch.tv/Leviathan111. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll potentially do some future updates, maybe a pushing version of the build as well, as I start to do more with that. Really just having a blast in Season 20. It's been great so far. Again, you know, just tons and tons of craziness here with this Barbarian. I'm loving that it's so much more powerful now. So thank you for watching this. I will see you in the next video. Adios for now.